Well, hello everyone, and we are thrilled that you can join us for Automation Hour today. So we're doing it a little bit differently today with webcams, so you get to see all of our faces today. So let's just start by going through some of our logistics. We are going to have all of the lines muted. You can post your questions in our Salesforce Automation Hour Trailblazer community group. We also generally have you use the questions widget here in GoToWebinar. We will be making sure that we get all of them answered before the end of the session, but we are going to try and hold questions to the end. So if you've got one, please throw it in, and our lovely co-presenters may be able to answer it while presenting, or we'll take them at the end of the session. As always, we are recording this and we will post this to our YouTube channel after it is done processing. For additional resources, of course, we invite you to join our Trailblazer community group. Our website, which you've gotten to so you can register, also has all of our past, and we're working on getting upcoming sessions for 2022 posted so you can register for those soon as well. And we're also on Twitter, so you can follow us at Automation Hour there as well. All right, what do we have next here? Upcoming sessions. So our last one for the year before the holiday break, we will have Ohad Idan, who is an MVP, come and join us in a couple of weeks. So we hope you can join us for that one.
Woot woot.
So it's bound to be a good one. As always, we cannot bring this to you without the support of our sponsors. So we definitely want to give shout outs to ActiveCampaign, first of all, and then our next sponsor who has been with us since the beginning is Concrete.io. So we want to thank them both for their support in helping us bring this webinar to the community at no cost. So, of course, shout out to the co-founders of Automation Hour, going strong, I think 5 years now. So David, Jennifer, and Rakesh had the brainchild to do this. There's been a few changes in the years past, and so current co-hosts are me, Michelle Hansen, and of course Rakesh, who is not able to join us today, unfortunately. So wish him well today. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Nana and Marshall.
Hey there, thank you so much. So excited to be on Automation Hour again. I'm not sure how many we've been on so far, but it's 3 or 4. So it's always fun to come back. I am Nana Gregg. I'm a solution architect and in charge of learning and development at VFP Consulting, MVP Hall of Fame. I'm a legend of low code. Watch Salesforce Plus in January. You got my blog here and Twitter and LinkedIn, so definitely connect with me. And as always, my flow friend, Marshall King.
Thank you. I'm Marshall King. I'm a managing consultant with VFP Consulting. You can see there I have a website. I've done some past presentations. Would love to connect with you on LinkedIn. I have a Twitter page, but I don't ever use it, so don't bother finding me on Twitter. You'll be lonely and bored out there.
All right. I got to sing the song, Marshall. I got to sing the song, just so you know. When we were thinking about what to present for this Automation Hour session, we were thinking about, you know, when you start out on a trail, when you start out on a path, one of the things you have to do is you have to make sure that you've got all the tools that you need and that you're prepared, right? That you got a backpack full of stuff that can help you along your way. So if any of you are Dora the Explorer fans or are parents, then you know the song, and it's backpack, 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 backpack. I'm the flow backpack loaded up with loops and variables too. Anything that you might need, I got inside for you. Backpack, 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 backpack. Wow. Okay, so we are going to help you fill your flow backpack today. Marshall, what are we going to do?
So one of the things we hear a lot is like, kind of, why do I use Flow? What am I going to do with Flow? So we want to start out by talking about some of the pretty cool things that you can do with Flow, things to get your mind churning in terms of how you might use this really powerful tool. And then we're going to really kind of go back to the basics and talk about, okay, I need to build a flow, or I want to build a flow. Where do I start? And, you know, the first thing you have to do is figure out what type of flow do you use. There are several different types. So we're going to walk through those types, talk about why you use each of them and pros and cons. There's also 2 different flow builder interfaces. We're going to show you a couple of small examples there. And then we thought from there we would deep dive into building a flow together. And we thought the best thing to do would build a record triggered flows, because as you probably know, flow is the future. workflow rules and process builder will be deprecated at some point. And so you're going to need to have a plan to migrate those things. And also there's been a lot of good discussion about not just migrating, but also cleaning up and merging and taking advantage of the features that Flow has. So in most cases, you're going to do that with a record triggered flow. So we're going to walk through building out a pretty simple record triggered flow on opportunities, showing some of the cool features and highlights, and also the little tricks and quirks about Flow to help you get through building out maybe your first flow or one of your first more complicated flows. We'll definitely take question and answer at the end, but as Michelle said, feel free to post them along the way so we can get back to them when we get to the end of the presentation. And then Nana's put together a bunch of really great resources and links that you can use to build on what we're going to talk about here today. So with that, Nana, what can you do with Flow?
Well, Marshall, I'm glad you asked. Well, number one is you can do everything you can do with workflow rules. You can do everything you can do with Process Builder. You can insert, update, and delete records, which you can't do with workflow rules or Process Builder, the delete. You can share files, share records. You can submit records into an approval process, which is amazing. You can post to Chatter. You can send an email. You can call quick actions. What else?
Using flow screens, you can actually provide your users with something like a wizard interface, walking them through a series of decisions or processes, capturing information along the way. So you're providing a better and a little bit more rich user experience. You can also use a flow screen just to show information. So everybody's used to seeing flow screens with buttons and toggles and fields to fill in. You can actually just throw a rich text component on a flow screen and serve up some information. So we've done that in some of our instances where the flow screen is literally just read only, but it tells you something important. And the information we provided was complicated. We had to go out and get it and loop through it and things like that. So flows can be just purely informational, but helping to guide the user. You can convert currencies if you're using dated exchange rates. There's a way you can actually convert currencies with the flow, which can be handy for approval processes when you're multi-currency. Ultimately, you can automate complex or multi-step processes, which I mentioned with the wizard interface, making it easier for people to walk through a more complicated business process. And you can improve data quality by providing that guidance and that structure, or by automating things behind the scenes that normally a user would have to do manually. When I update this, I also need to remember to go and update that. Well, you don't have to do that. Just put it all into a flow, and you don't have to worry about step 2 getting done because we can handle it all in one process. But ultimately, what's most important is that you can have a lot of fun with Flow. This is actually one of my favorite things to do. I think Nana as well. We used to work together for a customer, and we used to spend Friday afternoons. We'd get tired. The week was almost over. It'd be about this time of the week, and we would just sit down and think of a flow to build because it was more fun than whatever else we had on our agenda. So my feeling is that once you get into Flow and you get more comfortable with them, you're going to find them to be really powerful, and that power can be really fun. The way you can really improve the experience for your users, improve the quality of your org. It's just there's a lot of opportunity there. So hopefully you will have some fun with it.
You know you're a Salesforce nerd when your idea of having fun is building flows.
So we're going to talk about the different types of flows. Nana, you want to kick us off here?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll kick us off with screen flows. And Marshall talked about this just a minute ago in the slide. Screen flows are actually one of my favorite features. I'm really passionate about the user interface and designing with the user in mind. And that's exactly what a screen flow can do. It can give a better experience for the user to gather information from them or guide them through making a decision on how they're going to fill out a field. And you can actually stack multiple screens together. You can surface data, pre-populate fields, which is really awesome. And then you can put those screens in lots of different places. Like you can embed them on your Lightning record page. You can actually put it on the utility bar so that they can pop it open from there, and it's available on any record, or you can launch it from a button or an action. Now we've got some examples here, don't we? Yeah, go ahead.
A couple of simple examples. This was one that we put together for an approval process. And you can see it's really simple. You just flip the toggle and hit next, and it sends this opportunity into the approval process. We wanted to give the users an opportunity to explicitly request approval rather than having it be triggered on data or something like that. The other nice thing about this is that we could show and hide the Lightning component based on the situation with the opportunity. So if the opportunity was missing data that needed to be populated before approval, we could hide this screen, and instead we could show a little alert that says you must populate XYZ first. And then once it was approved, we could hide this screen so they don't see it anymore. So using Lightning record pages and Lightning conditional visibility along with flows, you can serve up, again, the interesting information to your users at the right time.
Right.
This next one is not pretty, but it's one of these wizard type interfaces. So this was the first screen of several where we had people creating projects from opportunities. Behind the scenes, the flow was gathering a lot of information from the opportunity, from the account, from other places, but these are things that we still needed the users to fill in. And so we basically walk them through a process. So we capture everything we need, they don't miss a step, and at the end, they get a really nice, robust project, pulling in information from various places, including what we've asked them to fill in along the way.
And what you can see here is you can see that these are all different types of fields. You can have lookup fields just like you can on a record, date fields, pick list values. You can create your own pick lists even on a screen.
Yeah, and something we won't mention today, but it's really cool, is in the App Exchange, there are lots and lots of Lightning components and flow components being added. So there are even some really cool custom flow components that you can add for like multiple selection of records and things like that. This is another pretty simple flow. It's a bunch of checkboxes, but we were able to use images. So this red bar is really just a red image that we uploaded as a static resource and put on the flow page. So if you want to make your flows a little bit, more attractive, you can throw up a graphic. You could throw up, arrows and guides and things like that to
Images,
make
yeah.
them a little bit, to make them a little bit more easy to consume and use. So lots of different options with flow screens. There are a lot of great examples out there. These are just a few that we've done, but wanted to give you some ideas. Okay, I'll talk about this one next. So a scheduled triggered flow is a flow that you want to schedule. You can schedule them to run daily or weekly. And so when you build the flow, you can actually specify that it runs only on a certain set of records that meet a criteria. So you don't have to run it on every single opportunity. Maybe you only want to run it on open opportunities or opportunities that were closed that day or something like that. So it's good for things that are going to be somewhat process intensive and it don't have to be real time. And you can run it at night. It runs on each record that meets the criteria. If it finds no records, then it just doesn't run that night. And it can do a lot of really nice processing and updates and things like that. So just commenting here, it runs behind the scenes. There's no user interaction. There's no flow screen, and there's no user initiation. It doesn't get kicked off by anything. It's only kicked off by the schedule that you apply to that particular flow. All right,
Auto
Anna.
launched flow. Marshall and I were talking about this one, and we hate the name of the auto launched flow because it actually has to be launched by something, which is really interesting. So it is triggered by an action. This is typically if you've been using Process Builder in the past. This is typically if you're going to launch a flow with Process Builder. It's the old way to do a record triggered flow is you would use Process Builder and you would push data into a flow to launch a flow from Process Builder or a button or an action. So it doesn't have any user interaction like a screen, but it is triggered by somebody checking a box, and that triggers it into the auto launched flow via Process Builder or being another action. You can also use this in Subflows. So we will create auto launched flows and call them inside another flow to make reusable flow components as well. So
Perfect. So we're going to spend most of the day talking about record triggered flows, so I won't spend too much time here, but as you can see, they're going to be basically what Process Builder has been. They are triggered by some action on the record. Something gets created, something gets updated, things like that. So as we mentioned here, you can replace workflow rules and Process Builder processes with a record triggered flow. And it's not directly invoked by a user, meaning they don't click a button or fill out a flow screen, but they are invoking a flow by doing something with the data in the system. And again, it doesn't have any user interaction. So these are things that are going to happen behind the scenes. They're going to process, create, manage data for you, but there's not a user component that users will be interacting with. And Anna, platform event triggered flows?
You know, Marshall, I will be honest with you. I have never used a platform event triggered flow. I've stuck with all the others. I don't know much about platform events. There are some automation hours that talk about platform events, that show how to use these and how you can use these in flows. So if you're interested in those, I would encourage you to go back and watch some of those episodes, because I have no clue. What
Yep,
Same
about
Paul
you?
boat. So
McCollum actually did one in November.
Just a couple
So,
weeks ago. Yeah.
yep. And he's on the call today, so we just got a whoop shout out from him.
plug him. Yeah. So there are a lot of great resources out there. We are not those resources, so we're going to
Yes.
skip this one. So another thing, if you've ever gone out and clicked new on the flow page, you get these two options, freeform and auto layout. Auto layout says it's beta. It's been beta for quite a while. And so I just want to show you the difference. You can certainly use either one. They both work almost identically. There are a couple little variances we won't get into here. Really, what I like about auto layout, I'm gonna lean towards auto layout. I'm gonna lean in on that one. Is that it's a better visual, but it also can help guide you through building your flow in a more consistent and correct manner. So we found one of our more complex flows and put it into the old freeform builder. And you can see here, I mean, it's not terrible. You can kind of follow along, but you've got lines crossing lines and you've got lines flowing off the screens. And it's not the best user experience. And sometimes when you're trying to troubleshoot something, it can be very confusing. So if you take this same flow and you can toggle flows back and forth, there are a couple of things you can do in a flow that will prevent it from going to the new builder. Primarily has to do with closing loops and multiple things coming into a decision, which we won't talk about today. But generally, you can toggle your flows back and forth in order to take advantage of both interfaces if you like them. So here's that same flow, and now it's turned into the auto layout, and you can see it's just much easier to follow and trace. It creates nice little loops for you, so you can kind of see the direction of your loop. It gives you this nice branching for your decisions. And the next screen shows you the entire flow. It's a pretty big flow, but it's much easier to follow and consume this concept and this information in this auto layout format. So like I said, you could certainly use either one. There's not a hard requirement, but I really like this one. And like I said, it often helps me think through what I want to do with that loop, or what about, what happens to that default decision that's hanging off to the right. Do I need to do anything there? It can help me remember things that I might not have initially thought of when I was starting to build the flow.
Yeah, and the auto layout and the what's the freeform layout. It's
Freeform.
funny because I feel like freeform layout and auto layout is kind of like classic and lightning, right? We all started out in flow with the freeform layout, so we're kind of comfortable with that, and so the auto layout is a little uncomfortable. Just like moving from classic to lightning was a little uncomfortable. But the minute you really start using it and start getting into it, you realize exactly why they made that change and that upgrade, and you'll really probably not turn back much from the auto layout.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to dig into a record triggered flow. We're going to build one here on the fly, and we're going to talk through these topics. And we have some slides here that we're not going to step through, but they'll be in the deck that gets sent out afterward, which has some notes and some screenshots of sort of each of these different elements and what we're going to talk about today. So you'll have that as a reminder, takeaway after the session. So I'm actually going to stop the presentation, and we're going to flip over to a demo org, and we're going to go ahead and start this process. So you're going to see just what we talked about. I'm going to go to new flow. Dun, dun, dun. It's a demo org, and we're live, so it's always going to be 10 to 20 seconds slower than normal life.
Backpack, backpack. I'll sing in between when it's slow.
Yeah, so hopefully the speed picks up rapidly.
Thanks.
So we're going to pick our record triggered flow out of those options we just talked about.
So again, a reminder, record triggered flow is the main one. If you're thinking about moving from workflow rules and process builder, the record triggered flow is the one that you're probably going to want to start out with and start moving things to.
Yep. And then we're going to go to auto layout.
What are we gonna build here, Marshall?
We're going to build an opportunity flow.
What's our requirement?
They're multitude. I'll describe them as we go.
Awesome.
While we load, and to prevent Nana from singing, I'm going to talk a little bit about flow strategy. And this is something that we've talked about behind the scenes is, you have the opportunity if you're looking at converting from process builders and flows, I mean process builders and workflows to flow, you have the opportunity to just do it one by one, right? I used to have this workflow, I'm going to build a new flow for that. But the better opportunity is to start thinking about how can I bring these things together into a single flow? We often call them a master flow. So one of the best practices is that rather than having a whole bunch of flows that fire on opportunities or on accounts or on contacts, put them all in one flow. And then you can use the power of flow, you can use the power of decisions and loops and et cetera to put everything into one process. It makes it easier to troubleshoot for one thing, right where to go if you want to work on a flow related to opportunities. Also, as you've probably experienced in your past, if you're using Flow and Process Builder and Workflow, they can conflict with each other. We had a situation one time where one Process Builder was updating a field and another Process Builder was updating it right back, and we couldn't figure out what was going on. So if you put everything in one flow, you have the opportunity to prevent those types of collisions or conflicts. And so we're going to talk about that here as you talk about starting your flow.
Hmm.
So on a record
Well,
triggered flow, the first thing oh, go ahead.
and real quick, I was also going to mention another benefit of having some sort of a master flow, and getting everything for one particular object into a singular flow is you can control the order of operations. If you've got multiple flows that are running on an opportunity, you can't control the order that those flows run in. And if there's some sort of dependency, you're going to have to get them all into one flow. So that's another reason to go through that strategy.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So the first thing we're going to do for a record triggered flow is talk about what type of record is going to trigger the flow. So we're going to pick our object, which today is going to be opportunity. Then we have to decide when to fire. So you can see here it's pretty obvious: created, updated, created or updated, and deleted. So if we start thinking about the concept of a master flow, you obviously can't have a flow that is based on both deleted and created or updated. So you still may have two flows for an object. But one of the things you can do, and we'll show you today, is you can have a flow that's created or updated, and you can have a branch which says, is this a new record or is this an existing record? So you can, instead of having two different flows, a created flow and an updated flow, you can put them both into one master flow. So that's what we're going to do today, one of our first steps. So let's talk about entry conditions and the concept of a master flow. And outside, there may be a use case for a specific flow. So I don't want to say that's never needed. And if you have a flow that you want to fire only on a certain condition, that's what these entry conditions mean. So right now there are none, which means that every time an opportunity is created or updated, this flow will launch. If I wanted to control that, that's where you can start to specify conditions. So we can come here now that I've said I want to have conditions. We can pick from the fields of the object that's kicking off, or actually the record that's kicking off the flow. So I can have it kick off based on certain conditions, certain things being updated, certain things changing. So maybe I want to fire when an opportunity is one. Let's just take that as a simple example. So I'm going to say when the is one field equals, and you'll notice here there are other options: does not equal, is changed, things like that. And I'm going to go and I'm going to say it's true. So is one has now changed from false to true. This section here is really important for talking about triggering a flow. And this can be confusing because the wording is not great. And Nana, help me clarify this if I don't clarify it well. The first option is going to launch this flow every time the opportunity is updated and the is one is true. Now, listen carefully what I said. I didn't say when it is changed to true. I said when it's true. So if I have an opportunity and is one equals true and somebody changes the name, the flow will fire. Somebody changes the close date, the flow will fire. Somebody changes the amount, the flow will fire. Because all it cares about is that something changed and is one is true. That's probably not what you want. There might be a use case for that, but probably most of the time it's not what you want. Probably most of the time you want to know when it changed to true. And that's what the second option is. So the second option says only when the record is updated to meet the criteria. So when it went from false to true, it will fire the flow.
Now, Marshall, question for you. I noticed that in your operator there up above, one of the items is changed. So if you had a pick list value there, so the stage, right? and you say the stage is changed because you want to see if the stage was changed to 1, for instance, right? What would your values here be? And why do we get
Um,
that little note box down there?
you have true and false. So these are what are called global constants. So for Booleans, you'll see these throughout the flow. You would pick whether it's true or it's false. So this one would say the stage name is changed, is true. And you'll notice that it's only going to fire when it's changed. So we no longer have these options. We don't need to pick from these options because we know the flow will only fire when the stage name is changed.
But this means it's going to fire anytime the stage name is changed, regardless of what it's changed to, right? So then
Correct.
you'd have
Yeah.
to add another condition there. So things
Yeah.
to think about.
Yeah. Now we're going to do most of these things in decisions. So our flow today is going to be a master flow. So we're not going to have any entry conditions. We're going to handle those with decisions inside the flow itself. So we want this to fire every time an opportunity is created or updated, and then inside the flow we'll decide what to do. Okay, and then the last thing we'll talk about are these to optimize the flow for fast field updates or actions and related records. Fast field updates, you can see here that it runs before the record is saved, and it has limited functionality. It only can update the record that kicked it off. So if you have an opportunity that fires, it can update that opportunity. This is the closest to a workflow rule that there is in Flow if you want to keep it that simple. And you don't have some of the more complex capabilities like subflows and chatter posts and actions and emails and things like that. So there's certainly some good use cases for fast field updates, but most of the time in our case, we're using the actions and related records because we want to get really fancy and complicated with our flows. We want to be able to go out and get a lot of information and do loops and maybe update other records or create related records or delete related records. So this is usually the most powerful one.
Yep, and these are in previous versions of Flow, these were called a before save flow and an after save flow. So if you see those terminologies or you hear that in older webinars or older blog posts, that's the difference between the two. The fast field updates is the before save, the actions and related records is the after save.
Yeah, and that's kind of buried in the description, but you can see both of them have before and after. If you forget, you can see that.
Yep.
And then this checkbox is one of those things that I've never checked and never researched why you would check it. So for today, we're going to pretend that checkbox doesn't exist and keep it simple.
This is a beginner class. We're all beginners here.
Yep. Some other things we're not going to cover today, but you can do some scheduled paths, which means that it's going to be kicked off based on a schedule, not like these scheduled flows which run daily or weekly. These are scheduled based on when your record has changed or been updated. And you can say, okay, 5 days later, go do
Scheduled
something.
email.
Yeah,
So just
exactly.
like you can do in Process Builder and Workflow, right? You can create a scheduled action or a scheduled email to update something later on down the road. So that's where the scheduled path comes in.
Yep, perfect. Thank you. Okay, but we're going to run immediately, and we're going to add a component. You can see here's another nice thing about the auto layout is it kind of prompts you where to put things, and it gives you what your options are. So you can see here all the things we have available from our flow because it's an after save flow, so it has more features and capabilities. So the first thing we're going to do is a decision. So I mentioned since we're going to do a master flow, we may want to have some things that work off of a new record and some things that work off of an existing record. So that's the first thing we're going to do is decide, okay, based on this update or this trigger, is this new or is this existing? So I'm just going to call my label new or existing, and I encourage you to really use the labels well and put good descriptions in there to help you when you go back and look at your flow to understand what you're looking at. I have a preference of never just typing yes and no, so I like to put yes, new record.
And the reason for that is if you have multiple decisions in your flow, you can only use that label and that API name once, that API name for sure, right? And so the first one you say yes and no, and then you get to your next decision and you want to say yes and no, and it gives it yes one and no one. And then later on, you start to troubleshoot and bug fix, and it's like, it tells you no 3 had an error, and you've got to go try to figure out what it is. So it's
Yeah,
always great to label them nicely.
yeah, perfect. So we want to know if this record is new, and there's not an automatic easy way. Well, there's an easy way to do it, but it's not automatic. So what you need to do to determine if a record is new is you create a simple formula, and you can create it from right here in this screen. When you go to resources, one of your options is a new resource, and one of our resource types is a formula. So I like to put a lot of people like to put an abbreviation in front. I do the same. It's kind of following programmer naming and give it some sort of a good name. And this is going to be a Boolean. Is it new? Is true, false? So we pick our Boolean data type. And then there's a formula in Salesforce that it just says is new. That's all you have to type. Is new, open parenthesis, close parenthesis.
So what this variable does is it looks at the record that is coming into this flow, and the formula is just going to run in the background, and it's going to look at the record and it's going to go, is it new? Yes or no?
Yep. So it's super simple. And so then there are these global constants I mentioned earlier for true and false. So we just type or pick true. I like to type them, but you can pick them from the list. So basically, if that formula is new, results in a true value, then yes, this is a new record. Otherwise, the default value is no, it's an existing record. Now down here, we have something we've kind of seen previously, which is when do I want this to fire? Only if the condition, if the condition requirements are met, meaning every time it meets the condition, it's going to fire, even if something else was updated. With is new, that doesn't make sense, but this would make sense with other updates. Or only when the record that triggered the flow is updated to meet the requirement, the condition. So again, generally you're probably going to want to pick this one, but every use case is a little different. But again, the issue is is your record updated and now it meets a new condition and you want to do something, or the record was updated and it always met this condition, it still meets the condition, do you want to fire? It's a little hard to explain. I'm not sure I made it clear. So we'll see if there are questions about that. Probably there will be. So once we've clicked that, now you see it started to build my branches. So again, this nice auto layout starts to build the branches, and I can see very clearly this is the branch for an existing record, and this is the branch for a new record.
And if we think about what Process Builder looks like, right, and how we build a process in Process Builder, at the beginning we choose an object, right, and it's a create or on update, right, and then we get to our next screen, and guess what we do? We created that little decision diamond. It's the same diamond, right? So it's the same as Process Builder. You have your little decision diamond, and instead of going to the right to create my actions if it's yes, and down if it's no, we're just creating two little paths. So it's exactly the same as Process Builder here. So this is just kind of trying to give you some of that familiarity.
Thank you. So we're going to do a very simple update here. So we're going to click on the plus, we're going to look for update, and we're going to update this record. So this will be a very simple update that doesn't have any complexity in it, but we're going to show you how you can use the record to get to the information you want. So I'm going to call this update owner. So this customer has a rule that they want the opportunities to be owned by the account owner, not the opportunity, the person that created it. So we're going to do that here with this update. We're going to use the opportunity that triggered the flow. So this one's really simple. We don't have to do anything else more complicated. We want this to update every time. There's no condition. When an opportunity gets created, I want to change the owner. So here on this side, I have all of my opportunity fields. These are the fields on the opportunity that triggered the flow. And I'm going to start typing, which is easier than scrolling. And I'm going to look for owner. And there's owner. And then I said I wanted to equal the owner of the account. So when you click in the value, one of your options, it's down here at the bottom, is $record. That is the record that triggered this flow. So every piece of information on that record is available in this $record global variable. So you'll notice you have this little fly out arrow. So if you pick this, these are all the fields. So I can see the account, I can see the stage, I can see the date. So if I need to make any decisions, if I need to use any formulas that look at this data, it's all available to me by using the $record.
And one thing you'll notice when you go into that flyout, you notice the fields at the top. They're not all in alphabetical order, because if you scroll down, you're going to get some more A's. The fields at the top are all lookup fields. You notice they've got the little caret. So it's a lookup field. So you can actually, just like in Process Builder, traverse through that lookup to get to an item, to get to a field that's on that related record, right? Or you can just use some of the regular fields that are down below. I also love that it puts the little symbol of the field type there. So if you've got a lot of fields, it can help you delineate and figure out which field you need to use.
Yeah, so as Nana mentioned, that is a really cool feature I forgot about. You can see text, you can see lists, you can see numbers, you can see dates. There's a Boolean, so you also do get that helpful guide.
And you can type, which is amazing. Now, sometimes, Marshall, I've typed there and it doesn't do what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, just do it again.
Yeah.
You'll see that in a minute on formula. It does it all the time on formulas. You type and you pick something and then it just goes back and it's blank. It's just a little bit of a UI quirk of some sort.
Okay, so it's not just me then. Good.
Well, it could be just you. And you can update multiple fields. We're not going to do that today, but you can see here, if you want to update more than just the owner, if you wanted to update multiple fields, you can do all of these updates in one place. So pretty simple. Okay, so now we have the update owner, and when an opportunity gets created, the owner will get changed. Very easy. So now we have a couple of things we want to do if the opportunity is not new, it is existing, and it is one. So what we're going to do is over here on our existing path, we're going to add another decision. And we're going to do a decision. And I'm going to call this stage change, stage change, because I can use this for other stages. Today, my only requirement is around the stage being one, but I might in the future have a requirement around the stage being prospect or the stage being lost, something like that. So I'm going to call it stage change. And then what I can do over time as my business and my needs grow is I can add more outcomes. And we'll go ahead and do that really, really quickly just to show how that works. So we'll just put closed one. And we're going to come in here and we're going to look at our record. So we're going to look at the opportunity and we're going to look at the stage and we're going to say if the stage equals, and one thing that's really nice, when you pick a pick list over here, it gives you the pick list values over here. So you don't have to remember what was the spelling exactly. So I'm going to pick closed one. This brings us back to this decision. This will make more sense now. I only want this branch decision to fire when the opportunity changes to closed one. So I'm going to pick the second option. If it goes from any other stage to closed one, it will follow that branch. Otherwise, it'll just do nothing. And then if I wanted a branch for closed lost, I could add another decision outcome and do the exact same thing. Go to my record. Stage equals closed lost. And I could continue adding to these. I could add more complex ones, which we'll do in a minute. Sorry, Nana, you were about to say something.
No, I was going to ask about that complex one, so I'll wait. We'll wait till we get there.
Yeah, right. So now you see again, it's kind of a nice guide. It's got closed one, it's got closed lost, and it's got the default outcome. So we're going to show a couple of other flow features. I'm just doing a time check. Okay, we're getting close. We got a couple more things to show you, and then we'll pause for Q&A. We mentioned some of the cool things you can do with Flow. So one thing you can do is you can send emails and you can do chatter posts. And so we're going to do a really quick email. When something is closed one, we're going to congratulate the winner of the opportunity. So we can go here, and an email is an action. And these are all the different quick actions that are in your org. And you can search for them. You can scroll through these categories. There are quite a few. So we're going to go in here and type email, and we're just going to send an email.
And there are, again, actions you can load from the App Exchange. And there's some other resources that we've linked into the presentation at the end, and then we'll post out that have lots and lots of actions that you can actually add to your org as well.
So again, we'll give it a nice name. Here in the body, you can type values, but one of the things that I like to do that's pretty cool, Nana actually is the one that showed me this, is there's this new resource type that's called a text template. And so this is another resource that'll show up over here. And here you can type out your information, and you've got the option for rich text formatting, which works in emails. It works in chatter, but it's a little more complicated. We're not going to cover it today, but if you ever want to do any rich text in chatter, ping one of us and let us know.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to give it a
What
nice
this is
name.
this is almost like an email template, right? So we're going to create a template that we could reuse other places, and we're going to pop in values from the record.
Yeah, and you can even do things like putting a formula in here. There's lots of stuff you can do.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to, you could just type something out. You could just type like congrats. Sorry, can't type here. And that could be the end of your email, and you can format it. But you could also say congrats, and maybe you want to congratulate the person that won the email. You want to, or the one the opportunity. You want to personalize this a little bit. That's where the resources come in. So now all of our resources are available, including the record. So right here, we've got our record again, and this is where, let's see if it happens. Oh, it didn't. A lot of times when you pick this the first time, it just sort of forgets that you picked it and it goes blank. We'll see what happens. So I want to congratulate the owner of the record, but I don't want to congratulate his user ID of, AE4572390. I want to go through the owner to the owner, which is the user. There we go. It's getting weird. And I want to pull their full name, or I could do their first name. And then again, we can go in here, just type record, go to our record. So here's a good example. It didn't, I picked record and it was like, no, you didn't. There we go. And we'll pull in the opportunity name. So you could say for winning this opportunity on this date with this stage. I mean, you could get, kind of crazy with pulling in information, and then you can do formatting.
You could even add links if there's something they need to go do somewhere else once they've won the opportunity. You can kind of give them guided paths.
Yeah. So so now that's our body. And then for our subject, we're going to do the same thing. We're not going to get fancy with it. So we'll do another new resource.
But Marshall, you can just type there, right?
Yeah, you can
Congrats
just
on
type there
winning
as
your
well.
opportunity.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it just depends on if you want to format, if you want to use resources and formulas and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, I couldn't type congrats on winning opportunity name because I can't get to that, but I can do it here through the template.
Right.
But we'll keep it simple in the interest of time. I'm also going to make this plain text because it's the email subject and not the email body. And I don't want it to have these weird P brackets in there.
Nobody wants weird P brackets.
It's the worst. You can send emails to a bunch of people. We're not going to do that today. We're going to just say we want to send it to somebody. And again, we go in here, resources. Oh, sorry, not resources, record. And we're going to go to our owner, and we're going to grab their email address. And then because I included rich text, I'm going to say rich text formatted body is true.
That way it sends it out as rich text as opposed to regular.
Yep, exactly. And so then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to add one more decision, and we're going to do a chatter post. So this is going to go out every time somebody changes the status, the stage to closed one, every time. But I may also want to do a chatter post alerting somebody that this opportunity was closed, but it skipped stages in between. So we can do that with another decision inside the closed one. We know that it got changed to closed one, but what was it before it was closed one? There is a really cool way to figure that out. So we're going to go back in here, do a decision, do the original stage, and we'll come down here. So when I type record, you may have seen this, there is one called record prior. So this was the prior value of the record before it was updated to trigger this flow. So when I go to record
Which is
prior,
amazing.
I have all my fields that were there previously, but now it's the last value. And so I could look in here and see, okay, what was this previously? Maybe it was an SOW stage and it skipped the proposal stage and the negotiation stage. So I can pick that. Again, I'm going to say only, I don't know if I actually need this one here. I think either one would work, but we're going to
You're
check
going
that
to
one
add
just in
one more
case.
condition. So when it was, oh, and it's been changed to one because that was your earlier condition, right?
Yeah, I'm already in that branch, so I don't have to do that here.
Cool.
I did that in my previous flow, but then I was like, oh, I don't have to do that. I'll give it a name.
So essentially, this is looking to see, hey, it was SOW stage, which is a really early stage, and now it's one. So they skipped a whole bunch, right? Which is not really great sales process.
Yeah. So I could put that in here. It should be redundant, but this is what Nana's referring to. It was SOW, it went to closed one. Why does that not look like a pick list?
It is.
There we go. That looks better. Okay. So now you see I've got branches in my branches. So I've got inside of the closed one branch, I've now got what was the original stage, and you could again do multiple outcomes if you wanted to have different responses based on what the original stage was. So we're really quickly in the waning moments here. We're going to do another action because I really like chatter posts. We've been really encouraging all of our customers to steer away from direct emails and use chatter posts. You can still get an email. It resides on the record, so there's visibility, there's history, things like that. So it's a nice way to accomplish several different things. So we're going to go in here and there's an action called post to chatter. We're going to alert the manager of the person who closed the opportunity, who owns the opportunity. Again, we can send a message. So we can do another one of these resources and make it a text template.
And like Marshall was saying, one of the reasons we're telling people to use chatter instead of email notifications, as he said, is there's an audit trail, right? When you just use an email notification, I mean, you could look in setup to know if that email went out, but otherwise, nobody looking at the opportunity would know an email went out. Using a chatter post, it gets posted, right? So there's a history tracking there. So you know something went to that person. And it gives the ability to respond, right? They can turn on their email notifications or not. So they're going to get an email from that chatter post or maybe not get an email from that chatter post. So they can kind of manage how much stuff comes to their email inbox, and it also drives people to the system.
Yep. I did flip this one to plain text because by default the chatter posts are plain text. There is a way to do rich text, but we don't have time to cover it today, like I said, so let us know if you want to do it. So
Yep.
now I've included the name of the owner of the record. So that's my message that'll go to chatter. Now the target name is where I want that chatter post to appear. I want it to appear on the opportunity that triggered the flow. So again, we're just going back to our record again, typing ID, looking for the opportunity ID. And that's all I have to do. Go ahead,
So
Nan.
chatter has to be enabled on the object where you're going to post. And we could post this on the account if we wanted to post it on the account. We could actually post it on the person record, right?
Yep.
And so that's kind of what this target name or ID is.
Yeah. Using the same features Nana mentioned, I could have gone from the record to the account and gotten the account ID, and it would post on the account.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that is the end of our flow. Now we have to save it. And one bad thing that I've done is I've done all this work without ever saving. So make sure you save frequently, otherwise you could lose everything you did. And use descriptions. That's also a very good practice, is to use descriptions to explain what's going on. So we'll save it.
Ooh, we got an error.
Yeah, it has to do with that record prior. See, this is what I was talking about. I wasn't 100% sure about what I should do there. So on this one, because I'm using, and this is confusing, but the error message is pretty clear. Because I'm using record prior, I don't need to use this whole if the record changed to meet the criteria.
Right.
It's specific because of this record prior. So if we get rid of that, and then we save, and then we activate.
I mean, it's not really a good flow until you've gotten at least one warning message error, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
And usually you debug before you activate, but we're going to go ahead and activate and go in.
yeah.
Go all in.
So yeah, so now this is ready to go. And so I'm going to go back into my opportunity. I'm going to find one that's in the statement of work stage. Here it is. And I am the owner, so I will get the email. So we're going to go ahead and skip this stage and move it to closed. Everybody cross their fingers. We're on the tightrope
Fingers
here,
and toes.
hoping that it works. Dun, 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 dun.
Backpack, backpack.
And there we go.
Skipped a bunch of stages when the opportunity is closed one.
So I have two flows. I did one to test this out, and then I did the one you just saw on the fly. So that's why we're getting two posts. And one of them has a mistake because it's not got the name in there. So, I got to troubleshoot this. This one's working really well. You can see the one that I did previously. So it changed my stage, no problem, but it did notify my manager that I might not have done my due diligence on this opportunity. And then hopefully I have an
See,
email.
did you get
Let's
the
see if
email?
I do.
I got it last time you tested.
I don't have it, but I don't know what my email address is in this system. So you sent me one earlier. Oh, there it is.
There it
So
is.
again, I'm
Congrats
getting
on
two
your win.
emails,
You got
getting two
two.
emails because I have two flows. So I got congratulated on my opportunity.
So, as we're thinking about filling that flow backpack, right? We were really looking at all of those things that that you need to know about, right? How do I start my flow? How do I choose how to start my flow, right? How do I do simple workflow updates? Because that was the benefit of workflow rules, right? They're really simple. I can check a box. I can update something really quickly. I can just trigger an email, right? So some of those simple things, they're super simple here in Flow. It's just a little different user interface.
Yep.
Flip
So
back.
as I mentioned, we'd love to take any questions. And then I will also skip ahead a slide. Nana's put a bunch of really great resources in here, both just general resources, but also some very specific ones on working with Flow, working with sharing, things like that. So definitely check these out. They'll be really valuable.
Yep, and we'll post them in the Trailblazer community, and we'll post them on LinkedIn as well. So you'll have access to all the links. Definitely, bookmark this stuff. Practice, play, try. Questions. I don't see
I
any
can't wait to use
questions.
the inbox. Oh, there's tons of questions coming in.
Are there?
Okay,
Yep.
good.
So this has been great. All right, so let's start from the top. Barb Dietz wanted to let you know that she loves your song. She also bailed on us. No, I'm kidding. She didn't have to leave the meeting though. So, but shout out to you there. So Jessica Rosenberg wanted to know, isn't Salesforce providing a tool to transition workflows and process builders into Flow?
Good question. I think there is the plan for that. And in our resources, I did link to the Salesforce admin's blog post that talks about kind of what the plan is and what's happening. And while you can just transition, again, one of the things you want to think about is flow is different. It's a little bit different. And you may not want to just one for one transition your workflow rules and process builders into flows. You may want to use this time and use this opportunity to consolidate, to make them more efficient, not only from a troubleshooting perspective, but also to just make the system more efficient. The less things you have running on a single object, if you have one flow that does everything, then your things are going to run faster. If you have, multiple flows that have to get called every time an opportunity is updated, your processing time is going to go up and your end user is going to really start to see some lag. They're going to blame Lightning. It's not Lightning's fault. It's your automation's fault.
Yeah, and definitely, just like when we transition from Classic to Lightning, instead of just flipping the switch, it's like take some time, reevaluate the pages, make sure that you optimize them for the new interface. It's
Yep,
pretty much the same thing.
exactly.
You can kind of roll it into a reevaluate your automation and kind of change your strategy too.
It's spring cleaning plan.
Yep,
Yes.
totally.
All right. So a couple of people asked if the deck will be shared later. So yes, both this and the meeting recording will be posted to YouTube. Generally, I try and get that done later, same day. So hopefully that will be up for tonight. And the deck will be a link in the YouTube video description as well as where Nana and Marshall have committed to posting it. So Paul McCollum, previous automation hour presenter, chimed in with, listen to these tips. These are good habits, are super important once your flows get up there in complexity. So 2 thumbs up to y'all for that.
Thank you.
Duncan said, if you have an existing complex flow among others on that object and you want to move to a master flow concept, do you have to recreate them all or is there a conversion to subflow option?
Good question, Marshall. You want to take this one?
Yeah, there's not a conversion to Subflow, and occasionally it can be tricky to do that because one of the things we spent all day looking at a triggered flow, which has that whole record object. Um, The
The
auto
dollar sign
launched,
record.
yeah, the auto launched flow doesn't have that because it's not triggered off of a record. So it can be tricky depending on the type of flow you want to convert. It is possible though. I just did this yesterday. I took a flow. I took a flow that was a screen flow, and there was a piece of it that I decided I wanted to break out and make it its own subflow. So when you do a save as to a new flow, you have to save as a new flow. You have the option to then change the flow type, but then you'll have to clean it up. So for example, I went from a screen flow to an auto launched flow. So when I tried to save it, it's like, what are these screens? We don't have screens. So I had to go and delete the screens. And sometimes to delete the screens, you have to delete subsequent actions because they're dependent upon the screens. So
Mm-hmm.
there's not a utility, but it is possible. And it's a good idea, yeah, to convert it to a subflow that, because I wanted to call the same subflow from two different, one from a screen and one from a record triggered flow. So now the screen and the record triggered flow have simple logic, and they both call the complex logic in a subflow.
Yep. And to highlight the difference, the record triggered flow, like Marshall indicated, has that dollar sign record to get you the values from the record that triggered the flow. The auto launched flow doesn't have that, right? So
Yeah,
that's where you have to do a get at the beginning, or you have to pass in values into the auto launched flow. And so
yeah,
if you're taking a record triggered flow and want to convert it, you got to change all those record dollar sign record values, right? And you got to start to do gets, and you've got to replace a lot of your variables and a lot of your things. So just think about that. If you've got an auto launch flow that you want to turn into a subflow, it's good to go already.
yeah, yeah. And so here's how you do it. You save as, instead of a new version, you say a new flow, you give it a new name, and then down here you can change the type. But there may be some cleanup involved. And if anybody wants to talk more about subflows, feel free to reach out because there's a whole lot of stuff you can do with input variables and output variables. Subflows are really cool and really powerful to help you, kind of like set it up once and then use it from all these different areas. So I encourage subflows.
We could do another presentation.
Yeah.
What else we got?
Absolutely. All right, so next up, can I send an email template that I've already created? For example, case notifications is what Dawn would like to know.
Yes, you can send an alert. So if you have an email alert that uses an email template, you can send that. Um, I don't know for sure if you can send an email template. Nana, do you know, or Michelle, do you know?
I don't know. I don't think you can just grab the template and like
Mm-mm.
change the recipients. I think it has to be the full email alert
Yep.
with the
Agree.
recipients.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, you can definitely do an alert. We just did that recently for some customer surveys where it has an email alert off of an object.
Absolutely. All right, so Jessica has another question for us. Back when you were configuring your send email, were you setting the sending user there as well?
I didn't do that, but you could have. So here in the email action, that was something that I skipped where you can set the sender address.
Perfect. All right, Cheryl's got a question for us. I have a flow where I am updating several fields on an existing contact record with information from a custom object based off several criteria. If one of the fields is blank on the custom object, it currently replaces what is on the contact record with a blank value. How can I get it to not replace existing data with blanks?
I have a way to do that. It can be a little tricky, and it depends on how you are, what type of flow it is. Um, it's a little hard to explain. I'd be happy to explain it, but one thing I've done, let me give you an example. Nana mentioned you can do a get. So you can do a get of values from this custom object that you have. And then you can do a formula on that custom object to say if it's blank, just use what was already in the field. So
Mm-hmm.
you would update the record with the data that's already in the record rather than a blank from the custom object. So
Yeah.
you can do that with
So
a
essentially what
formula.
you're going to do, essentially what you're going to do is you're going to create a formula field, and the formula field says if the value of the record in the get, right, is blank, then use the value of the record that I'm updating. And you put that in your update. So you do your field update and you put that in there.
Yep.
So
And then
a little
one other
complicated.
Yeah, one other way you can do it. There are totally ways to do it, 100%
Yeah.
ways to do it. Another way you can do it, we've done it with a variable. So I'm just variable test. And I want it to be, let's just say it's text or something. You can give it a default value, and the default value can be the value in that record.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just going to say like opportunity name, let's say. Sorry, I can't type. And then you could have a little decision which says, okay, is my custom object blank? If it is, then do nothing. If it isn't, then do an assignment. And what'll happen is if it's blank, it'll keep that default value, which is the value that already exists on the opportunity, so it won't change anything. If it's not blank, it'll overwrite that variable with the value from your custom object, and it will update it. So there
And
are a
then
couple
use the
different ways to
variable
do
to
it.
do the update. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And again, if you want to like go through that together, reach out to one of us and we'd be happy to do it with you. It'd be fun.
Yep. Marshall
Perfect.
loves to work on flows, so
It's quite fun.
it is.
It's I'm trying to convince my
Okay,
boss that I should just be a full-time flow writer, but it hasn't happened yet.
that would be a job I would love to have myself.
Mhm.
All right,
All right,
claw to the
Christopher
top.
would like to know, can you reference a record type by name without doing a separate query to look up the record type ID and storing it in a variable?
You can. It depends on kind of where you're at. So Marshall, open up your variable again. Do a new resource. Let me just show you how you can get to it from that $ record. Um,
This one may not have a record type though.
oh, that's true. Well, we'll look.
Um,
$. Yeah. So if it's got a record type, it's a lookup too. So if it had a
yeah, it
record type,
does right here.
yep, you can click on that and then you can get to the fields that are available on your record type. But it kind of
Yep.
depends on where you're doing it. You can do it here. I think sometimes when you do gets or at the beginning of your record triggered flow, at the beginning, if you're setting conditions at the beginning of your record triggered flow, you can't actually look through to get the record type name. You can't actually look through to get a value from the account either. You can only use the standard stuff that's there without looking through. But once you actually get into the flow and then you start using the record variable, then you can get to the lookup items, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Perfect. All right, Paul's got a question for us again. What are some other good naming conventions to follow?
Marshall loves
I mean,
following the naming conventions.
I have my own, yeah, I think, and that's why Paul's leading us down that path. I
Mhm.
like to do like the resource type to use like a 3 or 4 characters. So I do CON for constants. I don't know what stages to be honest.
VAR.
R4. I even do it typically like how I've spelled out these decisions. I usually like to put decision in front of it, or not the whole word, but I'll put like DEC. You can go back in here and you can rename these. Sometimes I don't spell them out. I do it more kind of
And he'll put
programmer-ish.
update in front of an
Yeah,
update.
yeah, UPD. You can put ask for assign. That's always fun. You can look at your flow
Yeah.
and it's got dirty words in it. But that's one thing that I like to do is to definitely, as much as possible, put some sort of a prefix in front of it because what you'll find is then when you go to look for something, if I was looking for, we saw that earlier, if I needed to look at a text element for something, um, I can start typing text and those things will pop up here. See, here's my
Mhm.
text templates because I put text inside of all of them. So,
Yep.
and Paul, if you have some suggestions, feel free to share them. But those are the things that I typically do is try to prefix it with something that tells me what it is at a glance.
The other benefit is when you get that email, because you've got a flow unhandled fault,
Yeah,
it's really much easier to go through and kind of figure out exactly where to target to look for because you know it's part of that update or it's part of that decision because you've got those prefixes.
yep.
Perfect. Okay, trying to catch up. We've got a ton more questions coming in. So Cheryl had followed up with it to screen flow to her question about how to not get it to overwrite the values, if that would help. Also, she seconds that we should do a presentation on subflows for sure.
Mhm.
So love
Okay.
that feedback. Thank you. Next question we've got, Elizabeth asked, can you showcase the flow execution for a new record?
For a New Year record, is that what you said?
For a new record.
Oh, updating the owner. Can you show how it updates the owner when you create a new
Oh, is
opportunity?
that the question? Yeah, to see that happen? Sure.
Mhm.
I think so.
So if I go in here, let's find an account.
that you don't own.
Yeah, let's see. Of course, I am the account owner.
Make me the account owner.
I am about to do that.
Oh, okay.
Portal account owner. Let me just find another account real quick. Do you want to ask another question while I
We
get
sure
on
can.
here?
You just let me know when you're ready.
All right.
Okay, so Melissa would like to know how many flows are recommended per object.
Well, preferably one would be the best practice. I think you could, you got one delete, right? Because you can't combine deletes and create update flows. But I mean, best practice is you got one thing that fires, period, when an object is updated, or one thing that fires when an object is created. It could be that there may be some times where you have to create a second one or a third one, but you really want as little as possible.
Yeah. The one thing that the one exception we've done is we've done some before save and after save because they have different characteristics and
Correct. Yeah.
so sometimes you may have one that's before and one that's after. That can provide some really interesting capabilities. We had one where we
Mhm.
were in the flow, we were double checking a bunch of data to make sure it was good. And if it wasn't good, we were checking a box. And then we had a validation rule that said if that box is checked, you can't close the opportunity. So it's like the before save flow did a check and then it said, oh, this is not good. And then the validation rule kicked it back. So that before save was really handy in that situation. But I agree with Nana. Probably, I would say one for creator update, one for delete, and then if you need to do a before save.
So interestingly enough, on the winter release readiness webinars, Diana Jaffe, the PM for Flow, actually said they are not going to recommend one per object or even one
Really?
per trigger
Really?
context. They
Hmm.
want you to use the entry criteria to basically limit flows to only fire when they are necessary.
Huh,
So that
Interesting.
is a huge departure from what we were
it
doing with
is.
processes where it was one per object, kind of like
Hmm.
triggers. So I'm looking forward to seeing more guidance on how you can actually do that without getting yourself into some big trouble because I was with you before that. It was all, one flow per trigger context, one for before create, one for after, delete. There you go. So I think that's going to be a watch and stay tuned. And I think the other thing is really it depends on your org and your use
It
case.
does. Yeah, it really does. Yeah.
So
Yep, that is
I
interesting.
think it's interesting. I mean, when you think about troubleshooting and things like that, right? If you've got a whole bunch with different entry criteria, they could potentially be overriding each other or calling each other left and right, right?
Yep.
I've
Yep.
never had that happen to me in the last 6 months. Nope, never.
Nope, never.
Nope.
No way.
Okay,
So,
I have our test here. Let's see if it works really quickly.
woohoo.
You can see that this account is owned by Simon Sales, and excuse me, am the opportunity owner. We're going to save. Um, and again, I should have disabled one of my flows. I forgot about that.
Fingers
My
crossed.
opportunity was created.
And go to it.
We'll get there.
Backpack, 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 backpack. You're gonna be singing it all
There
day.
we go.
Simon
Simon
Sales
Sales
owns
is
it.
now the opportunity owner.
Yep. And you can see even the chatter post happened, that recorded that
Yep.
change.
Perfect.
Cool.
Okay, so Elizabeth, back on your flow screen, asked what happened to the action for closed lost. So I don't know if
Closed.
I don't
Let
think we
me
created one,
go.
did we? Yeah, we didn't create one.
Yeah, I don't think we put anything in there. Yeah, so there's nothing happening. I didn't put anything in there. It won't let me drag. There we go.
It just gives us
But
the
this is where,
ability to.
yeah, we could. So you could theoretically have a decision for every stage if you want to do different things at different stages. But because I didn't put anything in there, it just kept flowing down and it did nothing. Now, here's something. So Nana actually brought this up yesterday, and I was going to mention it. So one of the things you can't do super easily in this flow builder is like redraw these lines. There are some ways you can connect things together, but it can sometimes be hard to do. So let's say that I wanted this closed lost path to go over here to this decision. I don't want it to go all the way down. So that's one of the arguments for going back to the old layout. So we'll flip this over. Now we're back in the old layout. And you can actually, you can actually, so again, I have to trace it a little bit. Oh, there's nothing under my closed loss, so it's not showing up, but I could draw it.
Mhm.
So I could do the draw from here and go into this decision and say, oh, see, it's asking me which outcome. I want it to be closed loss. Now I flip it back over to auto layout. Tells me I'm going to lose my positions. That's cool. And now look, it's reoriented the way the flow is structured because now it's going to close one, it's doing the congratulatory email, it's going to close lost, and then it's going down to this decision. So that's one way you can kind of redraw these lines and get more fancy with some of these connection points is going into the old layout.
For sure. Okay. Wow, they just keep rolling in. This is fantastic. All right. So Kevin Cavallero wants to know, does the email template we created in the example show up elsewhere, or is it only available or visible in this particular flow?
It's only in this flow because it's not truly an email template. It's just sort of an email action, and it's saying, "What do you want to send?" And I fill in that information here. So the text body is the text itself is available in this flow. So if I wanted to use this same text in multiple emails, I could do so. But if I go to another flow, these text items don't exist.
It's just, yeah, this is one of the resources that we built inside this flow to do things inside this flow. So if you were calling a subflow, you could potentially send this resource into the subflow, but that would be the only way you could get it out and get it into another flow.
Yep, which actually that is pretty awesome because Chris McDonald had that same question on the Trailblazer community.
Mhm.
He has a use case where he wants to be able to send a similar email when closing an opportunity, but the considerations of when to send it are different by business unit. So could that email template be available in multiple flows? No, but you could make it a subflow and then call it from the parent flows,
Yep. Or
kind of
you
like
create
Lego
that,
it,
yeah, or you
blocking it
create
out.
that email template, right? And
The email alert.
the email alert, and you call that same email alert with different flows.
Absolutely. All
Mhm.
right. Well, Kathy wants to give you all sorts of kudos. John Graff said this is a great show, Nana and Marshall. Lots to mull over on his next build. Huzzah. Anyone who says huzzah is a winner in my book, by the way. So next up, Robert says, we currently have a case queue for Salesforce users to create help cases. We also have a support chatter post that receives a lot of support requests. Could we use Flow to direct the chatter posts to the support group to open a case?
Yes, because a chatter post is an object, right? And so when that chatter post comes in, again, that could trigger the flow. So you could create a flow that's triggered on that chatter post being created. You'd have to put some good conditions in there. And maybe it's a certain chatter group or something that they post into. So use those conditions and you get the information from the chatter post and create a new record, a new case record um, to route into the case system. So yeah, that'd be a fun one. We should
Yep.
build that together.
Yes.
Yeah.
The only caveat I'll throw in there, I actually ran into a situation a couple years ago where there is an object I was not allowed to trigger record triggered flows on
Ah,
Hmm.
okay.
and process builder. So it was a content document. When you attach a file
Mhm.
to a record, I wanted to automatically update the sharing. And I actually had to get my good buddy Doug Ayers to write me a trigger that did nothing more than call a flow. um, just because I literally could not get to the object any other way. So that may be something to consider. Hopefully Chatterpost would
Mhm.
be an object, but yeah, you should totally try it. And then when you do it, you should come do it here
Yep.
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. And I was actually going to mention this. So one thing about some of these more arcane parts of the system is ultimately they are just objects with records. So you mentioned a content document. When you share a file with objects, I think it's called a content document link. I forgot the exact
Mhm.
name, but it's
Yep.
just a record and an object that says this content is shared with this. And you could
Hmm.
create a second one. It's also shared with this, and it's also shared with this. So we've done that where when you create a project from an opportunity, takes all the opportunity files and it shares them with the project just by inserting records. The same is true for sharing of private records, that it's just a bunch of entries into a sharing object that's created when you mark it private. Now, there are some rules around you can't have duplicates and have to have permission. So you got to be careful with the sharing, but you can do a lot of stuff with Flow if you realize that a lot of the Salesforce architecture is just objects with records. And chatter is just another one. Now, like Michelle said, sometimes there are some weird caveats, but
Mhm.
we've done sharing with Flow, sharing records, and we've done file sharing with Flow. So it's pretty cool.
And it's like that old commercial, right? Mikey, try it, right? See it, type here when you're looking for your objects. See what objects pop up, right? Test, try some things. You never know.
Yeah. Like I don't really know what's going to happen here, but we can look and see what fields are available, and we can start to kind of figure out what if we can do it or not.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, we got a little bit more conversation happening here. So Christopher followed in with he wanted to filter triggering by record type to have one flow per record type. So that's
Hmm.
why he was asking.
Yeah.
Um, so trying to mark these as answered so I can make sure we get to them all. So Paul, love Paul. Next question, what types of things can't you do with flows and know that you need to use Apex? I feel
I
like
think
that is
Paul
a
has to answer
very
that
big
question.
question.
Paul should answer that question. Yeah.
Yeah,
Let Paul present it.
Um, Stuff where you're gonna need to update more than 100 records at a time, like big, heavy, lots of processing stuff. It just Flow's great. I love Flow, but if you got a lot that you're doing, it's probably better to write Apex and to use some other tools for things like that. That's usually our rule of thumb. Like is we just think about the quantity, the processing time, and we look to see whether we can build it. We built some really complex flows that are processing on one record or two records or a handful of records, and then they can get super duper complicated. For us, it's easier to build flows for that because we don't know how to write Apex. Right? So some of it depends too on your org, on your use case, and on what kind of skill levels that you have working.
absolutely. All right, so Paul also jumped in with some suggestions. You'd asked about the naming conventions. So DSP for display read-only parts and SCR for read or write fields on screens. With the DEC, always put is underscore so it reads
Mm-hmm.
essentially.
Like a question. Yeah.
Yep. So then Daryl would like to know, are there any types of workflow rules or process builder types at all that you recommend not consolidating into a single flow?
I mean, I do kind of probably be case by case. Nothing like jumps
Mm-hmm.
out at me that says don't ever do this type.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah,
I can't really
same.
think of anything.
Same. I mean, I'd have to really look at them and make some decisions about what to do. And I think to what Michelle said, right? If they're not advising that you move everything to a single flow, then by all means create multiple flows and put your triggering actions inside that, or the filtering actions inside that flow trigger. But it's really something you just want to think about for yourself, right? Take a look at what you've built. You need to be able to troubleshoot it, right? So it may make sense to take 3 or 4 of them and put them together, and take 2 or 3 of them and put them together, right? So that you got some very logical sets of flows that you've created from your process builders and from your workflow rules, and just kind of think through that. But yeah, I can't think of any that I wouldn't.
Excellent. All right, so Robert has asked, following on to creating a case from a chatter feed, can the flow write case discussions back to the original chatter post?
You probably could. Eh.
I've never done a reply to a chatter post. That'd be interesting to try. I've not done it.
I mean, it's got a record ID, right?
Yeah.
So you could, if you've got that record ID, you might be able to reply to it and use it as the target, right? I don't know.
We should make Robert figure it out and tell us in the Trailblazer community.
I think that's a great action item.
Yeah, but that's a really good question. I'd love to know that. And that's what I would do. I would just try to start figuring out, okay, if the chatter post has an ID, see if I can find a reply in the object data and see if I can figure out if it's
Yep.
possible or not.
Or find a chatter post that's already there that has a reply to it. Look those records up, right? And look at the metadata for those records and see what fields are filled in, see what ID values are there, right? And that might lead you down the path to know how you can link other ones together.
Yeah. Yeah, I would
Absolutely.
suspect that there's something in the reply that tells you the original post, whereas the original post doesn't, that field will be blank, kind of like
Right.
parent-child opportunities.
Hmm.
I'm guessing, totally guessing, but I would bet there's something like that. So if you can find that magic key, you can figure it out.
Exactly.
I smell a future automation hour presentation, Robert.
Hmm. He's
Just
on
saying.
deck.
All right, so I think we're almost through them. Last one we got from Deborah, who unfortunately had to jump, but she said, thank you so much. She loves flows, is a newbie, and this was very helpful. She sure looks forward to more, and especially liked your explanation of how flows are different, but the same as process builder and workflows. So I think that was a very helpful kind of comparison analogy.
Yeah, it feels daunting, right? It looks so different, but it really is very similar. You just gotta. It's new language, right? It's like Classic and Lightning. It's just a little bit new, but once you get familiar with it, it works even more powerfully.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I think we may be needing to change our program name next year to Automation Hour and a Half, the way these keep going.
Hmm.
Cannot thank you both enough for staying on well past the hour to answer all of the questions. Cannot thank the attendees enough for hanging in with us, especially all the great questions that we had. We have
Mm-hmm.
finally gotten through them all.
Woot woot.
Great.
Backpack, backpack. Now you have a flow backpack, y'all.
I think it's time, Michelle. You need to pull the plug.
I don't know if I can do that. That's a great song. But no, Nana Marshall, thank you again so much for presenting. We really appreciate you being here. We appreciate all of our attendees, and we will see you all next time.
Awesome.
Thanks
Thanks,
everybody for
everyone.
attending. Thanks for the opportunity.